Welcome back. Well, they're in their 20s, they're hungry, and they're coming for your office. They're Millennials, also known as Generation Y, and many will want to wear flip-flops to work, and maybe some don't care about spelling. Others might have no discipline and expect the keys to the C-suite right away. But despite the fact that their managers likely raise millennial children on their own, those managers frequently find themselves at a loss as to how to train and retain their millennial malcontents. Toronto business management expert Bruce Mayhew has a plan. Calls this the Masterclass of Millenitude Motivation, and he's crafted a solution or some ways to, ease generational office obstacles involving our youngest working generation. Bruce joins us on the program from Toronto this morning. Hi, Bruce. Good to have you on the show.
Hi there. It's great to be here.
Yeah, this is something that I don't know how large of a broad of a stroke we're painting this generation, but when you think Generation Y or Millennials, what comes to your mind first?
I see them as a really highly motivated group of people, actually, that are largely misunderstood by themselves and everybody else around them.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say in a lot of places, let's say the person who's the top dog in the office, let's say the CEO or the executives, are mostly still made up of baby boomers and maybe some older Gen Xers who are, more jaded. But when it comes to the working environment, these are the people that are getting things done. They're calling the shots. You've got a younger generation breaking into the workforce or trying very hard to right now. How much different are they than those who maybe are at the top now, but, if you go back 20, 30 years when they were starting out, they might have been going about things completely differently?
Exactly, and that's sort of the funny part of the whole situation is when boomers, as an example, were in their late teens and early 20s, they were changing the world. They didn't want to play by the rules that anybody else had. They wanted to create their own destiny in their own world, and they were going to make it all happen. And then slowly they became more and more responsible and started having families and children, and their perspective changed. And now what's happening is that millennials have very much the same kind of approach where they're going to be out there and they're going to change the world. And boomers aren't seeing that correlation.
You think by and large it's true that there's less of an attention to, let's say, workplace appearance for this generation? And I wouldn't be a Generation Y, but I came very close. I'm still kind of in the Gen X frame, but even that to an extent, it seems like over the years we've seen a big wean away from looking good on the job. And I'm not saying you don't look good, but people dress far more casual than they did a long time ago.
Absolutely. There's a larger thing going on. It's not just millennials that are impacting that. Workplace dynamics have changed, and certainly a more casual approach to how you need to look on a day-to-day basis is changing. But millennials are pushing that a little bit further. They like to be very comfortable and very casual. They also really want to look good because, let's face it, when the boomers and Xers have been, right from the day that that millennials were babies, have been putting them into pretty high-fashion labels right from when they were like 2 months old. So they've always been very fashionable, and they still want to be fashionable. They just want to be casual and fashionable at the same time.
Now, if my company, let's say my office, wanted to hire 3 people all between the age of 20 and 25 and say, it's up to you to get where you want to in this workplace, you could have some very different outcomes.
Absolutely. And that's not enough instruction, frankly, for a millennial. Millennials want a little bit more structure. They want to know what their objectives are. And they want to be coached towards those objectives. So that's what they want. And they'll probably, instead of acting as individuals, those 3 people will probably, if they're all millennials, they'll probably band together and figure out how they can work together in order to get the job done.
Are we getting these ideas about how they'll act because we're already seeing this in the workplace with this generation, and we're drawing some comparisons based on, maybe just getting them to tell us, what's working experiences like for you, or talking to their executives and saying, what's it like, integrating young folk into the workplace nowadays?
We're seeing it certainly within the workplace where when we're responding to the way that millennials have always worked, that production goes up, profitability goes up. And we're seeing that when we treat millennials as if they're boomers, that productivity and team dynamics drops. So the more that we can integrate the way that they work into the workplace environment, overall productivity goes up and everybody's a lot happier at work. But a lot of this is stemming back, Tyler, to, again, how we brought them up. From the time that they were very young, we ran them around and brought them to soccer practice and ballet school and judo and karate, and we always had a coach with them. So they were always being coached on how to do things differently. And they were always almost always in team environments. And a lot of this is generalizations, and you're always going to get people on each end of the curve, right? But they were always impacted in team environments. So it was always group work. And then when they got into high school and university, again, they were promoted into working with teams and to push their boundaries and to be creative and to think outside the box. And they were rewarded for being a team member and doing all of that. So when they get into a work environment, they simply want everything that they've experienced through their whole life to continue.
Yeah, so you make a good point, because it's almost like with this generation, and this is again a broad stroke, but it might be true, that there's almost an expectation of service for them, and that coaching element. You're right, where it's almost like they're ready to leap, but they won't until you give them the A-OK.
That's right. They love to be coached. They love to be mentored, because they've been coached and mentored and taught all the way along through their life. And so they want that to continue. And one of the challenges that's happening is that when they enter the workforce, that they've now have spent the last 25 years being rewarded for thinking outside the box and being creative and working as a team, and they get into a work environment and suddenly everything's different. And they're been told to sit in the cubicle and talk when they're told to, and given small tasks and not asked to be creative or to be involved. And they find that really very frustrating. And
do you think executives actually see it almost to a point where they'll almost get an employee backlash, or maybe they'll get an employee that's too afraid to speak up or take risks?
Absolutely. I was speaking with somebody just recently, and they came through university, got their master's degree, were always top of their class, got scholarships and bursaries all the way along. They were they were fantastic, and they've joined a company, full of excitement, and they were like, I was certain that I was going to get fired for the first 6 months, and I was certain that my boss hated me, because he never once told me that I did a good job or that anything was good. But if I did something wrong, he came down on top of me, but I never got any positive reinforcement. And so I was certain that even though I was top of my class and thought that I was awesome, and he is, he thought he was being fired because he never got any feedback. So he went from getting constant feedback throughout his life to suddenly a complete vacuum.
And think about what that would do to someone starting in their career, maybe their first job. Not only do you have to deal with the stress of doing your day-to-day activities and getting paid for it, but you have to make that impression so you can continue on and have a good reputation on the job. And that's something that I think maybe a lot of older adults might forget when they're dealing with this generation. Not to say that they have to, because some bosses are going to be autocrats to everyone, and they're not going to give out those thank yous to even their number two, let alone the guy who's in the mailroom.
Absolutely. And it's difficult, certainly when you're looking at it from a millennial perspective and wanting that millennial to thrive, and even the Gen Xer for that matter. If you want them to thrive, it's a very difficult situation when they are not getting any type of positive reinforcement or recognition. But if you look at it from a corporate perspective and what's good for the business, what's good for the company, you're losing an enormous amount of productivity because you now have an employee who is not motivated, who won't go the extra mile, or who isn't being challenged to go the extra mile. And if you take a look at the ambition of millennials, they are highly motivated. They will work like crazy, and they will contribute very aggressively into your product or your service or your market or whatever it's looking for. But they have to know that they are making a contribution. They have to have a sense of individual contribution and recognition for that. They don't want to be thrown at the top of the tower and put up there on a pedestal. They just need to know that they've done a good job. And that's all that they want.
It can't begin and end at just, say, giving them the reassurance that they're doing good work. And I'm sure that'll go a long way, but
Absolutely.
There's got to be some other ways, too, that young people entering the workforce now, they obviously have different expectations than that of our parents who, in a lot of cases, and I've always been envious of this of my folks, is that they walked out of high school and got great jobs, and you just don't see that much anymore.
Right. It's certainly a challenge for the younger generation because they realize that they're going to have to work hard for that job, but they're also not going to bow to a bad job as well. So they're going to wait for that really good job if they possibly can. And that's why we see a lot of flipping at the bottom end of that scale. So when you see a millennial moving from job to job, they're looking for that great opportunity. They're looking for that fantastic job that they've been told they deserve all the way through their schooling.
Now, is there some sort of mismatch where, maybe millennials or that generation, they might not recognize the opportunity, but you say no, that's probably not the case. They know to recognize the opportunity, they just haven't had it yet.
In part, yeah. They know that there's an opportunity out there. They know that there's certain elements of that they do recognize. But that's the interesting part of sort of what I do in moving forward, is I help millennials understand what motivates them, because a lot of people don't understand what motivates them and what pushes their buttons. And so it's important that millennials get a sense of understanding of what their values are, what motivates them, why they're being motivated this way, so that when they encounter something, they can make good choices on whether this is the right job for me or not the right job for me. Or if my boss is giving me specific feedback, that this is why they're giving me this feedback. And it's not that they're being mean, it's just that's the way that they communicate. And when I take a look at what I do, it's helping millennials understand that, but also going into Gen Xers and boomers and helping them understand their personal characteristics and how they impact their world around them.
Yeah, that could be a great asset to any company that's trying to get to know their own workforce, is that there are different generational aspects at play, and that whoever's on top or the most senior level people might have been in the game for years, but when they started in that job, the game was a lot different, and it's different now for young folks getting into the working environment. And it used to be a kiss of death on your resume to have 3 or 4 jobs in a short amount of time, but maybe that's someone just itching and scratching to get to what they're really after.
Yeah, exactly. If they have a good reason for why they've moved around a little bit, then it's not as bad, because you're absolutely right. It used to be awful. If you were flipping every 2 years, it would be seen as a pattern. It's not as detrimental anymore. Now, if that continues, right, if you continually flip every year and a half to 2 years, it's going to cause you a problem. But at the very beginning, as you're entering into the workforce, I don't see it as a big challenge, as long as that millennial understands why they're flipping and can explain that to any prospective company that they're working to get hired by.
It almost seems, and I guess we'll close on this, is that whenever it comes to something that I always hear from people, like one life lesson, and even our older listeners can identify, is that a common thing that you always hear, Bruce, is that some people say, hey, I never learned anything about myself or about life in general, really, until I got out of school and started working. And I think almost everybody can agree with that, but it's even the same thing for today's generation, sending to their first job. It might actually be tougher.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of things in play for the newer generation, and frankly for the boomer and the Gen Xer, is that things are changing so quickly in the market that having a good sense of who you are and why you respond and communicate the way that you do is very important. It's very important to help you make the right decisions on all kinds of things, from who your partner is going to be, to where you're going to live, to what company you're going to work for and what kind of job that you want. Yeah. Bruce,
great chat. Thanks so much for this.
Thank you.
Bruce Mayhew, Toronto business management expert and innovative corporate trainer, has a company as well called Mayhew Consulting. Check that out online as well. We'll take the break. Back to wrap it up.